We are here today with Master Penguin and Slave Jenna, and they are the current International Master Slave title holders for 2023. And we're here to ask them some questions about neurodivergence, how it affects their dynamic, and how they work through it. So if you guys want to say hi and give a brief introduction of yourselves, we will get started.
Hi, I'm Master Penguin. As she said, I'm the current International Master of 2023 and Northeast Master 2022. We've been together in a relationship for 27 years, married 26 years, and in this community 20-ish years in MS relationship around the same amount of time.
Okay.
I'm also currently the director of MASP Gettysburg.
Yes, and we're also the current Northeast Master Slave.
I said that.
Your title here.
I said that.
Okay. And we've had several children together, as well as we fostered a number of others as well.
Okay. So we obviously, we're here to talk about neurodivergence. And I know we've talked a little bit about it previously, and there are more than one neurodivergencies within the dynamic. Do you want to give us a rundown of what neurodivergencies you guys are working with?
Well, myself, I am I'm autistic. What used to be called Asperger's syndrome now is the autistic spectrum disorder catch-all. My girl here has a ADHD. You want to add anything to what you have?
CPTSD and anxiety and some learning issues as well.
And then, as she said, we have bio kids, and we have 3 biological children together. One of them has ADHD, one of them has autism, one of them hit the genetic lottery and got both of them.
Right.
Well, you'll have that sometime.
So our house is literally neurodivergent soup.
Right.
We have all over in the house.
We've had some of our foster kids have also been neurodivergent and had other challenges like trauma, things like that too.
So I did source some questions for my local mensch group just to kind of get a baseline. And then I'm sure there'll be some follow-up questions later on, and we can get together on that. But the first question that we have is, what with the challenges you as partners, not necessarily just MS, but as partners face with your particular neurodivergences, how did you learn about each other's challenges within your dynamic, and how did you was that an organic kind of thing, or did you guys sit down and be like, hey, I'm this, and hey, I'm this, and these are the challenges we're going to face, or was this more of a organic growing together? For me,
I didn't have a name to what was going on with me when we started. When we met, I knew there was something different about me, but I couldn't pin it. Our first child, our oldest, he was diagnosed with autism at about 3, which if you go anything about autism, that's not normal. They don't, the doctors, not then. The doctors don't want to diagnose that young because they just know, and apparently he must have been really obvious because they did. So those first few years, we as parents are learning about what autism is, and he was high functioning even then. We knew he was high functioning, but we didn't understand some of the intricacies of it. And then each day that would go by, each week, there would be things that he would do that would be like, this sounds very familiar. Where have I heard this before?
Right.
And eventually it dawned on me that the thing I couldn't put my finger on was that I had autism as well. Now, I wasn't officially diagnosed with autism myself until, goodness, about 7 or 8 years ago?
Yeah.
You were 40.
Well, I'm 50 today, so 7 or 8 years ago, I'd been 42.
Right. Anyway.
So, and the reason I got diagnosed was because I was having difficulty at work. That not really difficulty, but I was concerned because I work at the time I worked in a call center where I was taking inbound phone calls, and part of the things that we would be scored on would be having emotion, sounding happy, being empathetic. And for me, I fight with that all the time, that I'm trying, at least in that role to really go above to sound like I have it, because normally I kind of sound like Ben Stein, Bueller, And so when people don't know me, they tend to think, well, he must be angry all the time or something, and that's not what it is at all. It's just, I don't always immediately open up. And so for that job, I was scored upon being able to have emotion and sounding empathetic to people, and it was hard. And so, I spent a lot of energy doing that. And so when my job started to become affected to the point where they changed rules and made it like more of a thing, that I felt like I had to get diagnosed in order to protect myself under ADA, Americans Disabilities Act, just in case.
Right.
And like with me, when I first got diagnosed with ADHD, it was actually called hyperkinetic child syndrome.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I had that. It was back in the 80s. And you don't really grow out of that. And my attention span was further compounded in my anxiety and depression, anxiety issues because of my PTSD.
Right.
And I knew I had PTSD, but I didn't know I had CPTSD until I started really unpacking a lot of that baggage through therapy and things like that. So that was kind of a work together to figure out what triggers were and things like that. And also with any kind of, like, when you have neurochemical imbalances, it often, you have to find the right prescriptions and the right medication mixes and things like that. So that was a challenge for us.
Yeah. So, as far as our dynamic went, again, I didn't know, she knew some. So it was kind of, we kind of learned together. We kind of realized that there were some quirks that we had with each other, that ourselves, that, we had to work through, and we had to figure out how to make things, work.
A lot of self-introspection too, but also
Yeah,
what works for us as a couple when we were having misunderstandings and things that
Okay.
challenging.
Absolutely. Now, I'm going to touch on, I know you had mentioned CPTSD. You knew you had PTSD, but you didn't know that you had CPTSD until later on. And I know most people are familiar with PTSD,
Right.
but can you kind of give us a brief explanation what the difference is between PTSD and CPTSD?
Yeah. CPTSD is more of like a chronic PTSD, where if you have multiple, like regular PTSD can be like from, say, people who are recovering from 9/11. That's one incident that traumatizes them.
Okay.
Whereas with me, I had multiple incidences over my childhood that was a continuation of trauma over and over again. So that puts you on a heightened state of alertness all the time, more so, and it's more complex than typical PTSD, because like trauma responses can happen more often. Trauma responses can happen to where like you're just, because if you have that like chronic trauma over and over again, building on things, like any little thing can just boom, all of a sudden you're not in a good place. You're more likely to get flashbacks, you're more likely to get triggers. And it's just a more complex unpacking of it.
Right. So as opposed to just having to unpack the one traumatic event that spawned the PTSD, now you're unpacking multiple
all
events
these
or
things
years
that build
of
onto
trauma
each other, and it puts you into like a chronic state of
kind of fight or
complexity.
flight, yeah.
And then also there's more disassociation involved with complex PTSD, where like trying to stay grounded in the moment could be more challenging.
Okay. I just want to make sure, like, not a lot of people know what CPTSD really is. Lots of people are familiar with PTSD,
right?
Okay. So our next question is, what are your recommendations for being transparent with partners without scaring them off and being labeled in a negative light? Obviously, you guys grew together with those diagnoses, so you didn't really face that challenge. But I know you guys have talked a lot on your platforms about how to navigate these things. And obviously you want to be transparent with potential partners.
If you want to go first, go ahead.
Well, we've had, I guess, variations of poly over the years, where like we've been in other relationships with play partners, or even relationships with folks. We have another family, and they have other people. So For me, especially with my trauma, I don't want to like re-traumatize somebody
Right.
by telling them about mine. So I do it bits and pieces when I'm coming with a new partner. But before I play with anybody, they know that like there's potential for trauma triggers. There's potential where I will just go off in la la land because of my ADD. You know, so I think it's important to communicate effectively and get to know people
Right.
better. I know a lot of folks in the community just are like, hey, I met that guy at the play party and now I'm collared. And, you know, that's
Right.
a lot of people get into that frenzy. So there's more layers about knowing people better.
Right.
Sorry. My hands. I talk with my hands. So I don't know. Do you have any?
I mean, for me, I mean, a lot of the issues I deal with are not like earth shattering. So I'm usually pretty quick to explain to people if they ask, or, you know, I know autism is one of the things that scares people sometimes hearing the word. But just for me, it's just a matter of understanding that, you know, what my facial expression might be showing right now might not be matching what's going on in my head. And so it's just an understanding that, you know, just because I look like I'm mean doesn't mean that that's really what's going on. It might be something else.
I think eye contact and communication also, some folks, like people are used to people having eye contact.
Right,
And
right.
when, with neurodivergence, and I've seen it with him and other folks that I know on the spectrum, sometimes they do overkill with the eye contact, and then that creeps people out in a different way, or they don't have eye contact, or they don't have a strong handshake, and so people interpret that
Right.
differently. So to be able to explain that you're speaking in a different language, kind of.
Yeah, I've never been one really to do the overboard. I'm always like not looking. So that tends to be for me. But I mean, you know, it's a lot of the things that affect me are just not really like direct when I'm with people. Sometimes it's more the why is he away? Why is he not here in this space right now? You know, so that sometimes has to be explained away a little bit, where, you know, I can't always people as well as I'd like to necessarily, which, you know, we're title holders now, so we're out giving speeches and we're out presenting classes, and so, you know, I can't always do that, and so I have to a lot of times prepare myself, knowing, you know, especially on the two times that we had the contest, is like, you know, you have things you have to do, and
Right.
then there's not going to be any excuse for that, so you have to go ahead and prepare.
Well, and I think also, you know, he's naturally more introverted and I'm naturally more extroverted. So like for me, I flit around and talk to everybody and this and that.
Surely not.
And he gets to yeah, right. And then he gets to a point where he's just like, I'm done with people. I just need a break. And he gets his downtime, and we've had to be very strategic, especially with content and conferences and things where we have strategic planned downtime. And that's good for me too, because I'll go until I like collapse. And so if we have that planned out for me too, it's good, because like, well, Jenna needs a little break. She can't be like constantly peopling, because then she'll like fall out at the end.
Right.
Yeah, and I don't want to stifle her. I don't want to stop her from being her and going out and being the butterfly and doing the things and talking to the people, because, you know, for us, she's usually the person that is talking to people and contacting for things, and so I don't want to shut that down. So I let her be who she is, because, you know, I don't really want to change her from
And there's only so
who
much
she
you can
is.
control.
I mean, I can control a lot, but do I want to? That's really the question.
Yeah.
I don't want to control those things that make you you.
Right. So obviously you guys came into the dynamic, into the relationship and marriage with these previous, you know, existing neurodivergence. Did you find that the dynamic of MS helped with those neurodivergencies, or did you feel like maybe they were big roadblocks for that?
Well, for me, I didn't know what to call it then, but I knew even as a kid that I was going to be in one of these relationships at some point. When I was a kid, I had envisioned myself on the other side of the slash, which is its own, you know, topic. But
Right.
We kind of in the early going tried to figure ourselves out. We switched back and forth for a couple months at a time, and then one day the pendulum just stopped swinging, and we realized that for us this was the way that worked best, that gave us the best opportunity for success.
Right.
And so that's, when we arrange this way. The structure, the rules, the protocols, all of that, especially for, me being autistic and not liking change a whole lot, that really helps for me. And for this one, who's kind of like a wild child doing whatever, helps give her structure and helps rein her in. So we both understand that these are the things we're looking to do and how we go about doing it.
But it also, I think, forced us to communicate.
Definitely forces us to communicate.
Which is, with me, with my, especially the CPTSD, like there's times where I just want to isolate or I want to like disassociate or whatever. And I have to tell him when I'm, doing those things. Or like with my ADHD, having that communication there with any kind of trauma, like a lot of our family dynamic was we didn't talk about it, so it didn't happen type of thing.
Right.
And so we're forced to talk about things because that's built into our dynamic.
Do you find that helps you kind of unpack some of those trauma triggers from your
absolutely
your growing up in the CPTSD that you have? Does it help you kind of work through those in a place that you feel safe? Because obviously you feel safe with Master Penguins. I give you a chance to kind of unpack that a little bit.
And we've worked through specific triggers even at times where we've had like, okay, I don't want this thing, say, or sex, for example.
Right.
I don't want to have this thing have this power over me.
Okay.
So we will work on it in little bits.
Right.
For a while until, and it's definitely edge play, but we'll do that for a while until it becomes easier.
Well, edge play is definitely determined by the people playing it.
Right. And edge play for, what's edge play for one person cannot be.
Absolutely.
But I think with the structure, that helps me to know what to expect next, and which is good for the CPTSD. But also with ADHD, the structure helps to kind of know what's going on. Then the structure helps him because it helps his anxiety too.
Another thing, and I know she doesn't like me telling this story, but it's like because of her abusive past, one thing that's really important to me is honesty and integrity. And when we started dating, I told her that, if you go out and you cheat on me, I'll be unhappy. I'll be upset, but we'll work through it. We will talk and we will work through it. But if you lie to me, if you cover it up, we're done. It's over. Right. The relationship is over. And she had to have that skill because she was a pathological liar when she was a kid. She had to be to survive what she had to get through. But I made it a point very early on. It's like, I am not going to tolerate that. This ends now with me, to the point where half the time she can't even tell the little white lies. No, Master, there's no surprise party going on behind that door over there. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I have a really hard time lying at all about anything.
But
surprises.
But back to what we were originally saying. I mean, that forces us to communicate. And another rule we have in our house, not just for us but for our kids as well, is that it is not okay to say I don't want to talk about it. It's okay to say I don't want to talk about it right now. But we're not going to just shelf it and not ever talk about a problem that's going on. We are going to discuss it. We are going to work through it, and we're going to come up with a solution. Now, if you're too emotional right now, you need a break, you need to decompress. Okay, fine. But we're coming back to it. We're going to talk about it. And we also try never to go to bed angry either.
Right. I hear that a lot in married couples is they try to work through it before they go to bed. Like, don't let it simmer all night.
Now, talking about it at like 2 o'clock in the morning when you're both exhausted isn't always good either. But
we've done it.
But we've done it. But another way, especially with the kids, like say they're afraid of the confrontation of talking about it person to person. Maybe we'll text about it, or we'll write a note about it, or we'll talk about it some sort of way. A lot of our foster kids, they were overwhelmed with coming to us about anything. Especially if they grew up in homes where like they never got what they needed.
Right.
And so we designed this whiteboard where the kids, one of our foster daughters, she came to us with 2 pairs of panties, and she washed a pair and wore a pair. And that went on for a couple weeks before we realized what was going on. And she was like, well, I didn't want to bother you guys. It was going to cost too much money. And I said, darling, here, I'm going to give you a 20. You either get your own underwear or I'm going to get them for you. And you might not like the granny drawers I get you. And at 15, she's like, I'll get them, you know. But so what we did is we have this whiteboard that has like, you know, shopping lists, schedules, things like that. And the kids can write anything that they want or need on the board, and that is like they don't have to come and ask us necessarily, and it'll be gotten for them at some point.
Well, not I mean, doesn't guarantee it's going to happen, but we're aware of it. We see it. It's you know, and they don't have to ask or beg or however they want to do about it. And you know, there's no judgment or anything. I mean, half the time we don't even know who wrote it up there.
Right. And so it's down there and we get it and it goes on the grocery list or whatever. And so that made for less confrontation because, you know, a lot of kids, especially, I know me growing up in trauma, it's like you're scared to ask or you say what you think the person wants you to say because you're afraid of like they're gonna fight you or whatever. Right. Because it ended bad. We had one kid who had a trigger one time where we did respite care for a sibling group for 6 weeks. Well, their mom was sick and their dad, there was a PFA against their dad, so they couldn't go with that. And our middle kid, Dan, had asked, he was obsessed, he was on the spectrum, he was obsessed with hash brown potato patties. And he put like a plate of like, what, 6 of them or something?
Or not.
Anyway, but a big plate of them and like cooked them in the microwave. And Dan, our middle kid, was like, oh, you're going to eat that many? And the kid like was 13, 14 at the time, had a total major meltdown in the middle of the kitchen, thinking that Master was going to beat his ass because that's what his dad would have done if he ate too much food, you know?
Now I did come out and I did say, hey, dude, I don't mind you eating the hash browns, but maybe not quite so many because some of the rest of us might want some or, you know, there's other things here. But I talked to him calmly in a normal tone of voice. I wasn't throwing chairs. I wasn't yelling and screaming. I wasn't hitting him. And he really didn't have the experience of, you know, a male figure like that was actually being respectful and not doing those other things I said. And so, you know, he kind of learns that, you know, not all men are this way.
Well, and that's important, especially for young men to learn. And then like if his younger brother got mouthy with me or something, he'd be like, don't talk to my wife that way. And so you have like this assertive masculine figure that's not
toxic,
dumping his chest and like making everybody else feel bad. So it was definitely healing for some of those kids to be in that positive environment.
Yep.
So on that note, do you find that, you know, obviously being on the spectrum, you have emotional regulation issues to the point where you may not show emotion like everybody else. Do you find that that's actually been a benefit with these kids with trauma because you don't fly off the handle as easily? You don't, like, you come across maybe a little calmer?
Well, yes and no. The thing is like, I can't always control how I look. I know what's going on internally. I know how I'm feeling, but it doesn't always show outwardly that way. And so I've had circumstances where kids, you know, were afraid of me.
Right.
Because of how I was looking or maybe my tone of voice or something. But in reality, I wasn't really angry. I was fine. And so sometimes with some of the kids, it would take a little bit of time for them to get used to me and understand, oh, that's just how he is. He's not really angry right now. It's just, this is how he looks. Sometimes this is how he sounds.
Right.
And so, yeah.
I remember one kid that she had a very abusive stepdad and would come over just like for the weekend to kind of just crash on the couch because stepdad was drinking, or he'd lock her out of the house and she'd get off work at like 11 o'clock at night and it was past her curfew or whatever. He'd lock her out of the house and she'd need a place to stay. So he would come up to her, and if she was like in shutdown mode, he'd go up to her and all of a sudden go, peekaboo, peekaboo, and it would make her laugh, and then she'd be like, Mike, why are you doing that? You know,
right.
But like little funny things like that for the kids, like if they're in a stressful moment, and he did shit like that.
One of those the youngest boy of the respite kids that we were talking about, like he acts like sometimes like he's afraid of me, and he's always kind of laughing, but he also knows like if I'm serious, I'm going to be serious.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I'll just play that up with him a little bit and I'll just kind of, what's going? You okay? And he'll just kind of, no.
Yeah.
But he knows I'm not going to do anything. He understands.
Well, and like, he's a gamer too, and they know that he plays Pokemon. And
Well, I did.
And he did for a while. So the kids are like, "Oh, you're the Pokemaster."
I finally cut that cord.
Yeah, but the kids would like go ask for question them about things, and we remember a scout event.
Yeah, there was a scout event at one of the camps where it was like a video game weekend.
Right.
At the camp. I don't understand why you go to camp to do the video gaming, but whatever, that's fine.
Yeah, right.
We went to the dining hall, which is where a lot of the kids were playing. They had different game systems set up on projectors and things. And there was this group over here that were all playing on the Game Boys. They're clearly playing Pokemon. And I went up and started talking to a few of them. And they always ask you questions. Like the kids always ask you, they try to test you. Like, are you a poser? Do you say you know this, or do you really know this?
Right.
And once I got past the gate and they understood that I knew what I was talking about, they were like me, like right on white, white on rice. They were swarming around. Oh, you've got this one. Can you trade me for this guy right now? Well, we'll see.
Yeah.
Right.
You know.
How do you get past this? You know.
So it's like, just in general with especially neurodivergent people, once you crack that wall, once you get through that layer, they understand, and you're best buds now all of a sudden.
And autism doesn't have any special interests or anything.
No, but autism does not have special.
No hyper focus.
No hyper focus.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Perfect balance in all things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something like that.
So we touched on how you guys kind of worked through some of your triggers bit by bit, almost like desensitization training. And, it came up with one of my mentor members, finding a therapist is really hard right now. There's just not enough mental health professionals to go around for the level of demand we're seeing. Mm-hmm. Then we'll just touch on it briefly. Did you use that therapy as a way to work through it? And if so, were you able to be open with your therapist about the dynamic between you two so that they could better, work with you as far as what was going to work and what wasn't?
All right. So I'll go first because mine will be short. I've wanted to, I've needed to. As of yet, I have not been able to find a therapist to be able to work through it. For me, it has, I'm not going to say nothing to do with my neurodivergence, but very little. There's other stuff going on that might be related to it, work related, some community related, but it's me. It's not like other people so much. And
but you have some of your trauma.
I do have trauma to work through. I'm a previous abuse survivor as well, and but for the most part, at least I believe I've worked through a majority of it. I'm sure we could always use more to try to get better at what we do, but for me, the priority has always been for her because she has, in my opinion, she'll disagree with me. She's had more problems. And so I feel like it's more important for her to get straightened out. Like just for another example, when we first got together, maybe this will come up later in another question, but we were in a program for transitional housing that they mandated us to go to a marriage counselor, because I guess our part of our problem was that our marriage was shaky or something, right? We saw that lady for 2 sessions and she looked at us, she says, "Your marriage is fine. I don't know why they have you coming here, but you've got some issues we probably ought to work through. So why don't we use this time to work on that?" And she had a thing where she said that, out of the dankest, smelliest, dirtiest shit come up some of the most beautiful flowers.
Yes, but you have to go through the thorns.
But you got to get through the thorns to get them.
Right, yeah. Right.
So now you.
Okay, now me. Okay. Well, and also it was the beginning of EMDR stuff. Okay. So I was kind of a guinea pig for EMDR, but EMDR really helped me deal with a lot of the trauma and unpack it. And trauma is like one of these things, like you're walking through the forest, boom, it hits you again. I know and I had gotten to a point where I was doing well with, between med management and just living life and having the coping skills that I had, that I wasn't in therapy for a while. But then the pandemic hit.
Right.
And we got foster kids, and we started having some of my wounds that I thought were scabbed over started opening up again, because I'm seeing it on the other perspective of, oh, that kid's got that issue I used to have. You know, so that was a challenge. And then even the whole, anyway, even the whole.
What is
EMDR?
Rapid
eye movement. It basically, it's kind of like a meditative state, and kind of like a guided meditation type of thing is the best way to describe it. And then you're usually specifying a specific trigger that you know about, or a specific event.
Right.
And it's kind of like a guided meditation, and doing that. And it's combined with, I've learned some grounding techniques. Like if I do start to disassociate, I look for like 5 things I can see and 3 things I can feel, you know, and I go through all the senses. So it's kind of a combination of things. I don't know the acronym, what the acronym means, but it's kind of like a guided meditation that kind of brings you back to the traumatic event without really bringing you back, because you've got this guide helping you through it. So it's not for everyone, but it's good. Also CBT, which is not cock and ball torture. Cognitive behavioral therapy is helpful as well. And so with the pandemic and the concept of like being told that you had to stay home triggered my fight or flight.
Right.
Some of the kids that we had were from food insecure homes.
So the empty shelves.
So the empty shelves in the store, that triggered me, and they like, oh my gosh, I got to buy everything because we're going to run out of food, you know. And I think that triggered a lot of people, honestly.
It did.
You know, because I didn't always have food security. You know, so I had to go back into therapy, and I found usually most LGBT friendly type of therapists tend to be more open and receptive to other things.
Right.
And I've kind of, the current therapist I have, I've kind of taught her a lot of stuff about what we do.
Right.
And there's a book, I'm trying to remember who wrote it. It's about like how to become a kink-aware therapist. It's written by someone within the community. And I've legit like given stuff like that to therapists. And my therapist actually ordered it and has read it. And so she's learning a lot through me. Now, not everyone has the bandwidth to like teach your therapist.
Right.
Hey, this is what we do. It's not abusive, you know, things like that. And I think just like with a new partner, I go in little bits and pieces.
Right.
You know, I don't like lay it all out.
I did the same thing with mine when I started seeing mine, and I was like, so.
Well, and I'm queer too, so it's like if in the second session you don't like, you run for the hills because I tell you I'm queer and you know I've got a girlfriend and I'm married. If you run for the hills by that point, like you're not the right therapist for me.
Right. We just didn't click, and it's time to find one I'll click with. Absolutely, I get it. You know, obviously, like you said, you're having to educate that therapist that, hey, this is okay. This is not abusive, because so many people, especially in the professional world, look at it and go, he's controlling. That's abusive. You know, and then you deal with, you know, in worst case scenario, mandated reporter.
Oh, yeah.
Who now has to go to adult welfare services and say, hey, this is a problem. And now there's just a whole nother situation.
Right.
With that said, obviously, you know, you stated that you weren't in therapy, but that, you know, it was probably something you ought to do, but, you know, but that her issues were more pressing and therefore hers were the priority. So, you know, how does a master or a dom help their slave or submissive when she's in disassociative mode, when she's in meltdown mode? What do you do, or what can one do to help kind of rein you in or help you work through that? What skill set do you use?
All I can do at the time that bad things are happening is to keep her safe. Keep her safe, make sure that nothing else is adding on to it. if there are things I can do to take stuff off of her plate, or you know, so she can work on herself, that's what I do. I mean, as far as the rest of this, I mean, okay, we're master slave. I could order her to do things, but let's be real for a minute. We're grown adults.
Right.
And ultimately, I can't fix her. I can't be the one to fix these problems. She's going to have to go to a professional in order to have that done. Now, I can do things to help facilitate that, make it easier. But ultimately, all I can do is be there and be supportive of her when she does these things. And you know,
I'll give an example. Recently, we've had a lot of deaths in the last year.
Right.
Like, I've probably been to 6 funerals since the beginning of the year. And one of the funerals was for my uncle that passed away. And I didn't go to the funeral because he lived in Alabama. But somehow learning of his death triggered me, and I had a memory that I had repressed of his son doing stuff to me.
So that was.
I always didn't like my cousin, but then it all of a sudden like opened it up, and I was like, "What the fuck?" And it happened during a sexual event where I'm all of a sudden not there, and it's not good. And because a lot of my trauma, sexual trauma, a touch, a smell, a feel, a weird word can all of a sudden I'm just not there. The lights are on, but nobody's home. So often he has ways of being able to tell that I've like checked out. He's very in tune with that. But to try to get me back, sometimes I'll just start bawling in the middle of something, and he's like, "Okay, come on, let's just hug it out," you know.
Right.
And we also have a special safe word. If I say purple, I can say purple anywhere. I could be in the kitchen and say purple, and he knows immediately I've been triggered. And
that's on both sides. That's both of us.
Both of us can say it.
Because I have triggers that happen as well.
You know, where he doesn't know, you know, and it's like you're walking along and boom. I think, you know, just kind of being in tune with each other. I think part of why I like bondage and stuff during sex is because none of my abusers ever used bondage during sex. And so that sensation of feeling something on me different keeps me in the moment.
Right. And it keeps whatever's going on in that sexual encounter maybe from triggering you quite as badly because it's a different.
Because it's a different sensation and it grounds me. It kind of like I need, and even it's interesting because I don't always have the feelings attached to what happened to me with the trauma, but even as a little kid, the trauma to me, it's like I was up in a cage somewhere, the real me looking down at the trauma, and I was safe in that cage.
Right.
You know, so even the little me was kinky. But like I was in that cage and I was safe and I was watching what was going on. So a lot of times when I talk about it, it makes me feel like it wasn't me. It was someone else that was there, but the real me was in the cage.
Seeing it.
Yeah.
You just happen to be seeing it. Yeah, I absolutely understand that.
Yeah.
So, you know, obviously we've talked about communication, we've talked about trust, we've talked about self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And those are great tools. What is probably the best tool you've used to help each other? Was it looking into it, understanding the issues that come along with it? You know, what's the best tool you guys use for helping each other through those neurodivergence?
I mean, we've really already talked about a number of the things that we use to help out. Like for us particularly, you know, her being the introvert, she's like the social media extrovert. She's the social media person. So if people are trying to get a hold of us to try to set up, you know, presentations or go to a conference or something, they're probably talking to her. We talk to each other about everything constantly, so it's not like I'm not part of the process.
Right.
But she's the one that's handling most of that because, you know, again, as I said before, I used to be working at a call center. I didn't always want to be on the phone or, you know, through communication talking to people.
Right. Kind of burn out on it by the end of the day.
Well, and I think a lot of our rituals and our protocols have been evolved around our stuff, like the bells that I wear. they often are for him, like if I wander off in the store because I'm like squirrel.
Especially in Walmart. It's really helpful.
It's really good, you know, because he knows where I'm at.
Right.
And then like when we're at events and things, I often walk in front of him for two reasons. First, so he can keep an eye on things and kind of scope things out, but also he can guide me along. If I get distracted, he can be like, come on, girl. So, and it's helpful.
Right.
And a lot of people are like, oh, the slave has to walk behind the master. Well, for us, that works better.
Right.
And I also, one of my trauma triggers is someone coming up behind me. And so he is behind me, and I know that the only person behind me is him.
Right, and you know he's not going to hurt
Yeah,
you,
exactly. So that helps with that anxiety as well. But between that and then like I'm kind of your emotional support kitty, like when he needs a breakaway for folks or whatever. He has some face blindness, so he forgets like who's who. Especially as title holders.
What relationship they're in. Oh no, they broke up. No, they don't.
So I have
mention that person.
I have to try to keep track of all that shit. And sometimes that's challenging because who knows who's with who, when, and yeah. So to try to remember, and I'm fairly good at that, but you know, when you're title holders, you get more people coming up to you.
We mentioned about the whiteboard in the hallway. Another thing that she didn't mention is that there's this giant wall calendar that's right next to it, which has not only our events, but you know,
dentist
doctor's appointments and when people were working and you know, things of that nature. And it's right there in the hall. So everybody goes up and down the hall to go to bed. They have to pass it. Right. It's not like they don't know where it's at. It's right there for all of us to see. And anybody can write up there what they need to do so that we're all aware.
We have a menu too.
The only problem is when somebody puts it in their phone and not on the calendar. That's
been known to happen.
But guilty as charged too.
Right.
Okay.
But we also have a menu, which is good for a lot of the kids that we had that were food insecure. We at least had an idea of what we were having for dinner.
Right.
So the kids knew that there would be an idea for that. And it's not always perfect. Some days we, you know, don't have tacos on Tuesday. But you know, so that gave the kids an idea of that there would be a meal.
Right. Even if it wasn't what was written on the menu that gave them that visual of there's going to be food here.
And then on the other side for her with her ADHD and she mentioned learning disability, she has dyslexia, dyscalculia. And so she's not the best with numbers and written stuff like that. So, and ADHD, of course, is bad for time management.
Right.
So control.
I'm the one that's in charge of the schedule for when we got to be somewhere or what time. Because I love her to death. If she's the one in charge, we're going to be late.
Right.
That's just all there is to it.
Right.
Facts.
And then as far as the other part, you know, I'm the one that handles the finances. If I send her to the store to get a couple of things, you know, she might come back with hundreds of dollars worth of stuff. And it's like, that's not good for us.
I've gotten better
as a family.
It got bad during the pandemic because like
pandemic was bad.
Always find things on the shelves and stuff. And so
they have toilet paper today. Let me get like 5 cases.
Between my anxiety and my ADHD, the impulse control, the panic buying, it was like a recipe for disaster. So we actually had a protocol in place for a while. And the masks, having to wear masks in stores was hard for me because I would get like claustrophobic with it and have panic attacks. So he would shop with me for a while because that would make sure that I didn't like blow the bank trying to get everything. And we'd stick to the list, but also I knew I was safe with him there.
Right.
You know? So that kind of did it both. I've gotten better at that specific aspect, but
the key to all of this is that we try to set us up for success,
right,
and try to eliminate the possibilities, the things that will cause us to fail. You know, I mean, no one's perfect. We're always learning and we're always readjusting, but we try to do the things that we know will be the best chance for us to succeed at what we're trying to do.
Well, like I wear the bells at home a lot and when we're together, but I recently started back to work and I work healthcare. And one thing I've been doing at work is I got these little penguin socks and my bag has penguins on it. So it reminds me that even though I'm not in direct service to him, I'm still in service to him.
Right.
And it helps keep me grounded while I'm at work and dealing with challenging people, you know, but then when I get home, I can put the bells on and then I'm directly in service to them. So that, you know,
it's kind of that mindset switch when you get home, kind of switching gears.
Right, and so that was helpful. You know, and I'm a sensory seeker. He's sometimes a sensory avoider.
Right.
So that can be challenging at times because I'm like, I want to touch and do all the things. And he's like, I don't want to touch it.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. I can absolutely understand that. I have the same problem you do with spending all the money in Walmart, like I go in. And so he's also put in a protocol where, hey, this is your budget. This is what you got. And I don't have access to the rest of it. And I hate public. So I do Walmart delivery. Just because I don't want to have to mess with it.
I used to like people, but
and then people became people.
People are just assholes at times.
Absolutely. That does bring us to the end of the questions that we have from the Munch. I appreciate so much that you guys have had a chance to sit down with us and talk to us. Obviously, if we have some follow-up questions, maybe we can arrange a follow-up kind of touch and base. That would be great. I appreciate it. And
any other questions or comments or complaints or?
No, you guys really did cover everything I could have thought to ask. This is not your first rodeo with talking about it, I don't think.
No. Been talking about it
but I do absolutely appreciate it because my Munch group has several neurodivergences in it, and they're trying to, most of them are fairly new, and so they're like, well, now what do we do?
One protocol that we also have in place, and because I have physical challenges as well, is if I have any kind of crisis situation, whether it be a medical thing or a mental health thing or whatever, he has something that he calls default setting. And for a time that he specifies, he doesn't usually tell me how long it is, I just have to take care of me.
Right.
Protect the property. Like the dishes can be let go, I can delegate them to someone else, but I got to take care of me. Because I'm the type, like, I'll have major surgery and like, okay, let's go do the thing. And he's like, no, girl, you need to take care of you. And so when he says default setting, and sometimes it can be when I'm having a mental health breakdown too.
Right.
That, no, girl, you need to take care of you. Let's get your meds managed. Let's just take care of you. And that's my purpose until he tells me otherwise.
Because ultimately, we want to be successful for the future, right? We're playing the long game. We're not playing the right now game.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And, even though I may want her to do something right now, if doing that something right now is going to cause harm to our dynamic, to our relation, then we need to not do that. We need to make sure that both of us are taken care of, or we're good before we head down that road further.
Digging the garden after major surgery or something.
Yeah. Right. Anything really.
The other thing I would say is that, our challenges and what we've had to do are not going to be the same challenges as what anybody else is going to have to do. So, you may have the same diagnoses that we have, but you may have to go about it a different way. And so the best advice I can give is to, first of all, if you're not sure, get your diagnosis, make sure you are dealing with what you think you're dealing with.
Don't Dr. Google it.
Right.
Right. And then talk. I mean, how many DS, MS presentations have we heard where it's like communication?
Yeah.
Well, what does communication look like in those situations? So, like, I mean, you can stand here and be like, oh, communication, but like you said, maybe writing it, texting it, especially if it's a high emotion.
Any of that is still, well, I mean, if it's high emotion, then obviously you need to do something to take that out of it. I know for a while, early on in our relationship, I had a journal that I wanted her to write in, and I would write questions in there for her to write. But she had a hard time writing, and I didn't quite understand that then. Yeah. So then at some point it changed into like an online blog where she would type in stuff in there. But it got to the point where sometimes I was too busy to read it, she was too busy to write it, and so that didn't work out. And so it got to a point where, we try to talk and connect when we can. If there's really something brewing that we can't be vocal about it, we can always send an email to the other to express it, we'll text message, but usually what we're talking about is something deeper than just a 1 or 2 line conversation,
Right.
We've been very blessed over the last 5-10 years that we haven't had to resort to that because we're always talking. We're comfortable enough that we're able to do that. But if that's not an option, then you have to find another way to communicate, because these relationships do not work if the two sides are not talking.
I think, you know, and that helps you to be on the same page about things too.
Right, so there's no miscommunication there.
Right, and we are both very different people, and we might come about it differently, but we try to focus on like what the end goal is.
Right.
Even if I do something one way and he does it another way, if our end goal is the same and we want to get to the place, it's okay if you do it differently.
Right, as long as the end result is the same.
As long as you're aligned with
important.
that. And then like with rituals and protocols and things, you know, we've had times where like I wanted to do this third person speech at one point.
Oh,
and,
me too.
And it was not, it didn't work for us.
Right.
And so like every couple months we say, okay, what is working right now? What's not working right now? And if it doesn't work for now, then fine. And if later down the road it does work, then fine. Like, I mean, obviously when I had young kids and I was nursing babies and stuff, it's not like he could tie me to the bed every night because you don't have to get up and feed a baby.
Right.
You know, but now that the kids are older, I can call him master or sir or daddy more in front of them because they're adults and they know what we do. And that's not as weird as like when they were kids, we had to be more subtle with it. So, you know, being willing to evolve together instead of evolve apart is always helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think it is, you know, it is helpful when you guys have learned your communication style, both separately and together, because I can imagine that they are a little different. Like your communication style, his communication style are probably very different. Learning how to navigate those early on, did you kind of, emotion is hard to read in people, and either you're highly emotional or you are not as emotional, or the emotion you're projecting is not coming through the way you want it to. With you, so that probably caused some roadblocks as well.
And we still have those at times because like with my impulse control issues, or if I'm tired, or if I'm like, I've got hormonal stuff going on with, you know, that age, you know, sometimes my impulse control is quick and I'm quick to boom, judge. And like he'll say something and it'll come across weird to me, and either between my trauma and my ADHD, I'm ready to like, hey, I'm gonna fight you, you know. And so I have to kind of step back and think, okay, did he mean that the way I'm taking it?
Right.
And that's where grounding techniques can be helpful. And then he has to learn not to always respond, you know, immediately with, oh, you know. So we've had stumbling blocks over the years. But if you do have a miscommunication, you just talk about it and you say, okay, I heard this. And then he's like, no, I didn't mean that. And, or I'll be like, I'm mad because of what you call it. And not to take, like, if you're pissed off at your kid, don't take that out on your master.
Right.
You know,
make sure it's directed appropriately.
Right. You know.
And the other thing I hear a lot is like sometimes people will say, well, you guys make it look so easy. Well, we've been doing this for 27 years. So by now we've got a little bit of experience doing that. But we were not this way 24 years ago. You know, when we're starting now, we had to navigate, we had to learn.
Trying to pack bags for the trip on the way here. I mean,
right.
The biggest argument in the house is what's for dinner sometimes. That's part of why we've done the menu thing. Cause like, you know, or where are we going for dinner? I don't care. Where do you want to go? Make a damn decision, master.
We have a rule that she is not allowed to ask the question, although she still does it. What do you want to have for dinner tonight? If she wants me to make a decision, then she's got to give me options. It's like, we could have this, we could have this, we could have this. What would you like? You want to make a decision? I'll decide between us. But this, what's for dinner floating up in the middle of space is like, that doesn't cut it for me.
And masters are not mind readers. We think they are sometimes.
So important.
And the corollary is when we're out running around and we want to go to a restaurant, or where do you want to go to eat at a restaurant? It's the same argument, because it'd be like, I'll say this, like, well, I really don't want to do that. Let's do this. No, I don't feel like that. Let's do.
Right. So do we have the three options either place? Like we can go get Mexican, we can get Italian, we can get pizza. What would you like?
And sometimes he gets indecisive. I'm like, master, I just need you to make a decision, because like, and sometimes that's important because like sometimes, especially, bless your heart, especially if they're on the spectrum, they're dense about it, and you have to be like, hey, make a decision, damn it.
I need you to decide this for me. I'm not.
I've had a
That's all you
shit
have
day
to
at
say is
work.
those words.
And then once I tell him that, he's like, okay,
Because-
I'm the master.
because quite honestly, there are some days I do the exact same thing.
Where you don't
And I'm
wanna-
like, you know what? I don't want to decide it. You figure it out.
Right,
Right. And,
right.
you know, but yeah, and not to carry over like challenges at work or whatever. Try not to bring that into your dynamic because that can just be a
Well, and I think
clusterfuck.
there's a difference between bringing in the challenges from work and bringing in maybe the emotional or mental
Right.
exhaustion that comes with it, especially if you have to mask, you know, to do your job, either to
Yes.
stay, you know, on task or to, you know, have that social
It's a lot of
interaction that
mental
you're
energy.
not ready. And sometimes you get home and that mask drops and that's just, yeah, you're
You're
done.
like, you know.
You're done, either for good or for bad. You're either not doing anything else or you're
Well, and I deal, like I work home health, so often I get people with dementia, I get challenging, contrary, difficult people, and it's like you have to take care of them, so you're a caretaker of them, but you're also kind of in charge of them too, because grandma can't go wandering off in her underwear, you know, like she could, but if she does it on your watch, you might get in trouble, you know, so, and sometimes, you know, especially with dementia and stuff, they'll say nasty stuff to you. So you have to kind of like not internalize that and understand that this is the issue that they're having, not the person. And to
Right.
separate like, and even with neurodivergence, to separate what is something that is typical of the challenges that they have with their neurodivergence versus the person.
right.
You know, like, because just because you have a diagnosis doesn't give you an excuse to act like a jackass.
Right.
And, you know,
It may be a reason why you acted like a jackass
Right.
in that moment, but it doesn't get to be your personality.
but and own it.
But
and
there
own
are some
it, you
people
know.
we know that are not as good people that have these diagnoses and they use that as a reason to be
Well-
nasty to people. And it's like, I mean, I have a really good friend of ours that her husband is autistic,
Mhm.
and we've had many conversations with the action saying, okay, this is the diagnosis. This is just him being an asshole.
Right.
Right,
Right.
You know,
right.
you don't get to label that and say, oh, I can treat you badly because of my autism. It's like, no, you still have to treat people properly. There may be
Mhm.
times where you don't control it as well as you would like.
And at that point you own it.
Well,
And
like,
at that point you owed it and you apologize for it and you do better next time.
and no diagnosis gives someone the excuse to be abusive towards you. Like I said, I work with people with dementia. I had one lady that I actually quit with her as
Right.
a client because she was being abusive not only to me, but abusive to other people, like the McDonald's lady, you know, and racist and just, you know, just
Right.
nastiness. And just because she has dementia doesn't give her an excuse to be abusive towards people. And I don't need to put up with it in my professional life. I don't need to put up with it in my personal life.
Right, right.
You know, so just because you have a diagnosis doesn't give you an excuse to be abusive towards someone. And
Right.
if you find that you're being that way, then you need to go get professional help. of
Right,
some kind.
maybe you talk
know.
to somebody who can explain to you that, yes, you're being a jackass. No, it's not because you're autistic or ADHD or
Right.
whatever that diagnosis may be.
Right.
No, you're just a jackass. How about we work on
Well,
that?
and people can, you know, it's
Amen.
the awareness that self-awareness that,
Right,
you know, and I've known S types, there's some S types that think like a master's just gonna fix them without
no,
having to do things.
no,
And it's like, you have
Yeah,
to
like
be
you're
willing to do
like
the
you're
work.
completely absolved of your responsibilities of
Well,
having
I'm
to do
just a
anything.
slave, I
It's
can do
all
whatever.
my
Yeah.
work, and it's like that is
No,
not how it goes.
Yeah, whether it's mental health or physical health or whatever,
Right.
you have to take the initiative as a person trying to advocate for yourself.
we have to definitely be proactive in it, you know. A lot of times, in our personal dynamic, we talked about this earlier, I have an issue with med compliance.
Mhm.
And in order for him to help me be accountable for that, we put a protocol into place that I had to be med compliant.
Right.
Yes, he was fixing that, but I had to stick to it. I had to
Right.
take the responsibility for that. And I think you guys are a great example of, yes, you have CPTSD, you have these things. Yes, you have an autism diagnosis, but she's not supposed to manage your autism for you. You're supposed to manage it.
Mhm.
You're not supposed to be like, oh, well, I'm ADHD. You didn't keep me on track. This is your fault.
Right.
You know, you guys have to own your own as well as, navigate those issues together. Because there are probably rituals, protocols, those kind of things put in place to help manage that on both sides.
Right.
But you have to be willing to participate in them, and you have to be willing to put in the work.
And ultimately, we're all adults. So
Right, everybody's grown. Yeah, everybody's grown.
Big
Yeah,
grown
we
folks.
can help each other, but we can't do the things for the other.
Right.
We each have to be responsible for our own stuff.
Well,
Right.
like I have challenges with disordered eating, and there's times where I'll want to go all day without eating and stuff. And so if I'm having a struggle with that, I could take pictures of my food and show him, hey, I did eat, I ate something healthy,
Right,
and because I'm not allowed to be abusive to myself either.
right.
You know?
And I think that's so important that people classify abuse as coming from somebody else. And it's really hard for people to recognize that they're being abusive towards themselves. And I think it's really nice. It's really good that, he can say, hey, not taking care of yourself is abusing yourself, and that's not okay.
Right.
And while that does help, I don't want to say fix it, but it does help keep you cognizant of it, and he can help.
Right.
He can help you fix it, but he can't fix it for you.
Like self-harm, I'm not allowed to do self-harm.
Right.
But if I feel the need to channel that energy somehow, and I need a good ass beating, I can ask for that.
Right. Right.
And that's the difference between, like I went to a class that a friend of ours taught about like the difference between self-harm and like abuse. Like if you are channeling it in a way where you're trying to get that emotion out without like just self-deprecating
Right.
thoughts, if you want your person to like do the stuff to you with self-deprecating thoughts, then you're just initiating the self-harm.
Right. They're just handing it out for you.
Right. Whereas if you have it in a way where you're like, hey, I'm trying to channel that energy, it's
Right.
different.
Hey, I'm having some struggles with wanting to do this. Can we
You need to
fill in the blank
I need to
here?
work through this emotion. So let's have a good scene to work through that emotion.
Right.
Type of
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. People say play is not therapy. People are wrong.
It can be
It
therapeutic.
can be therapeutic. It is not therapy.
Right.
It is not sitting down with a professional, but it definitely can be cathartic
Oh, yeah.
to play and to get that emotion out, and it can help you process whatever's going on. And I think that is important. And I think it's great for neurodivergence as well, because you can say, hey, I'm overwhelmed with this. Can we do a brain reset? That's what I call it, is a
Right.
hard reset,
Mhm.
get in there and reset that, and then
Mhm.
approach it again.
Right.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for coming
You're
on
welcome.
that. It's been incredible. And I absolutely look forward to some follow-up questions and getting to pick your brains again.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Enjoy your
For having us.
rest of your stay here, and enjoy your trips around the country for your title year.
We like unpack, we wash the clothes, we repack. We unpack, we wash the clothes, we repack.
Yeah,
Right.
the next 2 months are going to be particularly busy for us.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
I found it easier just to go to the laundromat sometimes and just like wash it all, throw it all back in the sequence.
Well, I give you a hint. Boy, Robbie taught me this. Wash at the hotel before you come home. Robbie does that every trip he takes. He washes it in the hotel laundromat, comes home with the only dirty clothes he's
No.
got is the ones on him.
We could do that. Anyway,
No,
I don't know.
Sorry.
Anyway, maybe.
we have a free washing machine at home.
That's fair.
I
All right.
understand that. Still.
Well, I am gonna stop the recording.
All right.
Thank you
Thank
again
you,
so
guys.
much.